welcome back to Fox News Alert. A redacted version of the Mueller report will be released to the public in just hours.
Yeah, but with questions surrounding alleged spying and the origins of the investigation, kind of the hot new topic lately, will today's release provide us with any answers on that?
Here now to weigh in is Republican strategist Ned Ryan. Ned, today's the day. The conversation's not going to be over today, though. That's for sure.
No, not at all. And people want to know what's going to happen with the release of the Mueller report. You know, in reality, nothing. It changes nothing. Mueller already cleared him of any conspiracy or collusion. And A.G. Barr, when he looked at the report, and I want to remind people, he was in the loop for weeks before he released his 4-page summary. He also came to the conclusion there was no obstruction of justice. So I know that there's going to be collusion truthers who are going to cling to anything inside of the report and continue this farce, this fairy tale for weeks. Because I think Andrew Weissman and those that actually constructed and wrote the report will do their best to create as much smoke and innuendo as possible. But in the end, I think when it's all said and done, when the smoke and dust clears, we'll come back to where we started. There's no collusion, there's no conspiracy, and there's no obstruction of justice.
Yeah. The New York Times headline, is White House and Department of Justice discussed Mueller report before release. You also have Jerry Nadler super upset that there's this 9:30 presser before a release closer to noon. At the end of the day, the president didn't invoke executive privilege. He didn't shut down the Mueller report. Are the media and a lot of Democrats out there trying to just find any way to be angry about something?
Well, of course they are. They're committed to the big lie. This is the thing that not only congressional Democrats, but many people in the mainstream media have been committed to this big lie for several years. They've driven a narrative. They've been involved in pushing this. So for them to come out and all of a sudden say we've been wrong for the last 2 years, it's not going to be something that a lot of them want to do and might never do. But I think the thing that we need to look at, guys, is this. The Mueller report is the end of nothing, really, in my mind. It's the end of the beginning. It's the end of Chapter 1. And what comes next is Chapter 2, and that's titled The Reckoning. Who did these leaks? Who did these lies? Who put this collusion conspiracy theory in place? Who used our surveillance state and law enforcement as a political weapon against a political opponent over policy differences? And as Joe DeVeneta said last night, I think where this ends up, this was Obama's DOJ and FBI. It was also his CIA. John Brennan was heavily involved. And I think the real question when this is all said and done is this. Who knew what and when inside of the White House? As I said in the spring of 2017, when the unmasking scandal was coming to light, when it's all said and done, if we can actually get to the bottom of it, I think it will make Watergate look like amateur small ball.
Now, we know, obviously, for the last couple of years, but last couple of weeks especially, a lot of Democrats have been focusing on obstruction because, we know at this point there was no collusion. But let's be honest here for a second and say there are going to be things one can assume that will make the president look bad. It may not be the level of obstruction. It may not be the level of collusion. But how much are Democrats going to hang on every little bit?
Oh, I think they're going to do everything they can, Jillian, to continue this. Again, I would remind people inside of the executive branch, the head of the executive branch, the president, has the right to fire anybody. They serve at his pleasure. And James Comey, the thing that's funny to me is Democrats hate James Comey just as much as Republicans. They're just using this as an attempt to continue this theory that there was obstruction of justice. James Comey was fired because he was an inept and, I would argue, corrupt director of the FBI. Donald Trump had the right to do that. And as you mentioned earlier, Rob, there was no attempt to obstruct the Russian investigation. There was no attempt to fire Mueller. He let this run its course. So I find that any attempts for obstruction of justice are pretty thin.
And Ned, the fact that they're going now they want the unredacted report. They also want access to all of that underlying evidence that built this report. They're looking for access to a ton of negative information on the president that they can hammer him with for the next 2 years.
Well, the fact of the matter is some of that grand jury stuff is never going to come to light. It's just simply not going to happen. But I would argue this. I want as many of the underlying documents to come to light as well. Again, I want all of the FISA applications to come out. I want the memorandum that laid out the scope and the justification for it to be released as well. So we want as many underlying documents as well, because I think when it's all said and done, Rob, it will actually help the president to show what a scam, what a farce, and what a fairy tale all of this really was.
Well, we will see a couple hours from now, a few hours from now.
Yeah,
Thanks,
that's
Ned.
right.